Hello, welcome to It's Not Just Cricket. We are back. Sorry for the late publishing this week. We just had the opportunity to get back in the studio. So that means just a couple of days later than usual, but it'll sound and look a lot better. So hopefully you'll appreciate that. I'm back from Sri Lanka, but my mind is still very much there. So I think what we're going to do in this episode is just talk about Sri Lanka. We're going to talk about the cricket, the place, the food, lots of things, and we're going to do it all in the company of British Sri Lankan journalist, broadcaster. Is that what we call you, Mark?
Yeah, I think we can go with that. Yeah.
Mark Machado, also all-round good bloke, friend of the show, podcaster. How's the Murali End going?
Murali End, it's never been more exciting, Matt. Obviously, Sri Lanka are on their way, or they're here in England already getting ready for the Test series. The women have just won the Asia Cup. The men have just beat the ODI series, as you know well, because you were there. Just beaten India in an ODI series. So yeah, it's all very exciting around Sri Lankan cricket. It always is.
How good is your country, by the way? So I've just got back from that India-Sri Lanka series. I was there for 2 weeks, Kandy and Colombo. Every time I go to Sri Lanka, I just think this is one of the best countries in the world. Definitely one of the best countries in Asia as well. It's so cheap. It's got... just for a holiday, I mean, you know.
Yeah, look, me and my sister spent a lot of time growing up. We'd go to Sri Lanka every year and we'd come back and we'd be like, Dad, why have you done it? Like, why did you move here? Like, what persuaded you to come here? I mean, it's a tropical island paradise. It's got great beaches. You go to Kandy, it's kind of a bit higher up. It's a bit cooler. You can go up to the tea country. The weather, it's much colder over there. You go up north, it's a kind of more arid region. They've got elephants, they've got leopards, they've got bears. They don't have tigers anymore. And it's just, there's a lot going on, a lot to see, a lot to do. It's really cheap as well to go on holiday. Probably the most expensive part of it will be your flight there. And I think the thing that really makes it, and I admit I'm biased, I think it's the people, right? I think they're really hospitable. It's a real sense of how important tourism is, and also Sri Lanka's relationship with the rest of the world. So I don't think there's that many people, as there is in other parts of the world maybe, that want to kind of rip tourists off and want to, generally Sri Lankans in Sri Lanka want people who visit the island to have a good time and will go out their way to try and facilitate that.
You missed out the food element. I've been lucky a couple of times to go to Sri Lanka, and yeah, the food is just incredible.
It is, yeah. It's quite similar. My mum's South Indian, you know, so I feel quite at home in Sri Lanka. I think the food's fairly similar, the climate's fairly similar, the geography. The only difference I would say with Sri Lanka is I love India, but India can be a bit hectic in the big cities. You don't get that in Sri Lanka, even in Colombo. Traffic's not that bad. There's just not that many people.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of narrative that it's very similar to India, when actually it's very close to India, and we have very good relations with Indians and India. But it's a unique culture all to itself. As you say, it's definitely nowhere near as hectic. The food, I always think, is a bit of it's a lot of South India and a little bit kind of Malaysian Thai like kind of influence as well in there. There's a lot of use of coconut and a lot of use of cinnamon, which are two very important things of the island. I went to Jamaica about 2 years ago, and I thought that was quite like the kind of, the vibe of Jamaica is very similar to Sri Lanka as well. People are very laid back, very relaxed. It doesn't move at a particularly fast pace. I think it's the thing about being an island, right? Where things just seem to kind of slow down a little bit, and it kind of relaxes and chills people out.
Where would you recommend, if you were advising someone who hasn't been, which parts of the country would you advise to go to first?
I would say as soon as you land at the airport, don't try and spend too much time in Colombo. Colombo's just a big kind of Asian city. Get down south, find a resort. I love Bentata, Hambantota. Go to Gaul, relax, find a hotel there, and kind of go down the beach and jump in the water and wash yourself in the Indian Ocean and wash away all the stress of life.
That's sorted next summer.
Yeah.
Well, you can also wash yourself in a shower if you want, but Indian Ocean, that's a pretty good option as well. And just to highlight that it is so cheap, do you know how much a beer was in my hotel? I was staying in 5-star hotels, really nice. If you're staying in a hotel like that in India, it's going to be, £7 or £8 probably. £2.50. Incredible. It's
Yeah.
so much cheaper. And you go out and have food, you'd have a really good meal for about 10 quid.
And that would be like locals would consider that expensive, right?
Yeah, that's in a nice place.
Yeah.
Yeah, extraordinary. Right, let's talk about cricket, shall we? Because the Sri Lankan Test team are over here. We're going to be starting a 3-match Test series very, very soon. What kind of state are the Sri Lankan Test team in at the moment?
So, last World Test Championship, we finished in 3rd place. Admittedly, a bit of a distance behind the 2 finalists, India and Australia. Though there was a series against New Zealand in kind of April, March, April last year. That if we'd won that series 2-0, then we could have got ourselves into the final. I would say it's a complex question to answer because I basically think we're quite good at home, and I'm not sure how good we are outside of Asian conditions. I think part of that is, and I think it's impossible to have this conversation without getting into this, is the accessibility of Test matches to this side outside of Asia. A lot of our players are kind of top. I think 6 of our top 7 batters have averages over 40. But a lot of that is because they're playing one-off matches against Ireland, Afghanistan, Zimbabwe, Bangladesh at home, and are able to kind of artificially inflate their averages almost on pitches and in conditions that they're used to. And for a lot of the boys coming over are going to be playing in that first test at Old Trafford. This will be their first test in England. Haven't been over here in 8 years. The ball's going to move. There's going to be grass on the wicket. It's going to be green. If it's overcast, I'm a bit nervous for them.
Is there, I mean, on a couple of them points, is there any way they can, clearly we've got scheduling problems in international cricket, and that's something we've spoken about on the podcast before, and that's something that needs to be looked at for the other teams. Is there any way, while that's still a problem, they can, tour and play eight teams, or is there just not an appetite from the oppositions to be able to do that?
So there's quite a lot of touring happening by kind of A teams, development teams, under 19s teams, emerging sides, whatever you want to call them. Whenever they get the opportunity to, SLC are more than happy to facilitate it. I think there's 2 kind of wider currents that SLC are too small, or Sri Lanka cricket, I should say, are too small to kind of fight back against. That's scheduling. Like, the ECB don't appear to have an appetite to have your West Indies, your Sri Lanka, your Bangladeshis, and your kind of smaller test sides over that often. I think the only reason this has happened is because it's a part of the kind of ICC's plan. They need it for the World Test Championship points. And secondly, the reality is, we had this earlier in the summer, in the English summer when the West Indies were here, is our best players want to play, or ended up being pushed into playing white ball cricket. I don't want to put words in their mouth and say they want to play T20 over red ball, but if you're a young Sri Lankan player, if you're Hasaranga, right, the fortune to be made in the IPL is far greater than the fortune to be made in Test cricket. You look for your big kind of Test cricket moments, and every kid in Sri Lanka who's playing cricket in Sri Lanka is dreaming of playing a Test match at Lords. Like, still, regardless of how much money's in T20 franchise cricket, that's what they want. But at the moment, Sri Lanka are averaging 1.5 Tests in Lords every decade. So it's not really something that you can be as good a cricketer as you like, but it's not really something that's.
It's not a viable option.
It's not a viable thing
not
to
something
to
to
kind of build a career around. Yeah.
Well, I mean, moving on to the Test series here, do you think you could test England, or do you think it's going to be pretty one-sided and it's going to be a tough few weeks for you?
I like to think we can test England. Obviously, England have lost Ben Stokes now. He won't be part of it, so there might be a shift in the kind of attitude that they bring into the series. For me, I actually think it all depends on how well Sri Lanka end up bowling. It's an experienced bowling attack, but I don't think any of them have bowled in a test match in England. So if we can adapt the conditions and kind of limit England to reasonable scores, I think there's enough experience in our batting side with Dimith Karunaratne, Angelo Matthews, Chandimal, even Danajai De Silva, the DDS, the captain, to kind of be able to put up reasonable scores. They're playing a warm-up game as we're recording this against an England Lions team, and it's not gone particularly well. I'm not sure how much we can read into that, because some people say it's rusty. The boys have kind of, they've had an opportunity now to get out and kind of knock that rust off. They're gonna have to hit the turn up at Manchester fully focused. Hopefully they have a few good days and what's left of this match, and can practice well and can really kind of. I think they've got it in them to put on a good show if they want to.
It's not the strongest line side either, as that
No.
would be a bit of a worry. They just bowled them out very cheaply, the Sri Lankan team. Give us some names, some young players maybe we should look out for in this series that some English fans might not have heard of, who could emerge.
So Kamindu Mendis is
The ambidextrous spinner.
The ambidextrous spinner, yeah. So he kind of, I think he first went a bit viral about 7 or 8 years ago as an under-19 player because he was ambidextrous. The thing is about being, and Azim could probably tell us, shed a bit more insight in this. It's being ambidextrous as a bowler doesn't really give you any benefit in cricket because the umpire tells the batter what arm it's coming from, right? So it's not like you can run up and just change which arm he's going to bowl from. But actually, the thing about Kamindu Mendis is he can bowl with both hands, but actually he's a batter.
Yeah.
And he's had a bit of he kind of came in, he emerged with quite a lot of hype, as a lot of Sri Lankan players end up doing. They kind of emerge with a lot of hype, have a small run in the team. It doesn't quite work out for them because they're about 21 or 20 and they're just been thrown into like the MCG. And then he kind of had a few years in the wilderness, but he's kind of re-emerged last year or so. And he's obviously matured as a player and he's kind of figured out what his game is. And then actually in all 3 formats this year, he's been quite a handful on occasions. Seems to really figured out how to bat in T20, which for Sri Lanka was a bit of an issue. But the format that I think he's probably best suited to is longer format. So he had quite a good series against Bangladesh, which admittedly was about 4 months ago now. And I think he might be, because he strikes me as quite a clever player as well, he might be the one that might surprise a few people. The other player that is coming in kind of red-hot batting form, but almost has no record at all, I think he's only played 2 tests, is Pathum Nissanka. He was picked in the squad essentially off the back of being our best, most consistent batter in the last kind of 12 months in white ball cricket. When he burst into the scene, I thought this is a red ball player, but I thought he'd be one of those players that might end up playing too much red ball cricket. Obviously, that effectively, I think what's happened is they've realised this, or he's realised this is an opportunity for me to play at Lords. So he's in the squad currently.
Will he play?
I think what I think will happen is whoever doesn't do well if the batters all don't do well as a unit in Old Trafford, I think he'll come in then, because I just think he's at this point he's by far and away our best striker of the ball and our most competent batter. So I think they're going to have to put him in if there's any issues in that first test.
Yeah. I think he's one of the best batters in ODI cricket over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of runs scored. He might even have scored the most runs, actually. He's a proper player, I think. Just going back to the ambidextrous thing, I think it's really handy, isn't it, in T20. So if you want to sneak in an over and you've got 2 left-handers, you've got a guy who can bowl right arm off spin, perfect. You bring him on and try and sneak a cheap over in. In Test cricket, I don't know, is it as useful? I mean, the other thing is, I was speaking to someone about Kamindu Mendis in Sri Lanka, and they said, okay, it's all very well being able to bowl left arm and right arm, but if you don't do either that well, what's the point?
Yeah,
I would absolutely. I mean, when you mentioned it, that would be my thing. Actually, you get caught up in the whole I can do it both hands, but neither of the ones are quite at the right level. And actually, are you making it harder for yourself? I mean, in T20 cricket or one-day cricket, there's a lot of small advantages. There could be a short boundary, things like that. The wind, and you could try and take advantage of it. Test cricket, you have to be able to deliver that ball 6 balls in a row, over after over, stock ball in the same spot, and that's how you're going to get wickets against good players. Actually, if keep changing, the better players on good test pitches, you're going to help them because you're going to be inconsistent, and boundary balls will open up. So unless you can tell me that he can do both, in the test match where he is good stock delivery is top end, I would encourage him very much to focus on his stronger one, which there will be a stronger one, and then if there is a situation where in the second innings or something there's a rough patch where you can access with the other side, then go for it. But I think it's important to realise Test cricket's all about repeating the basics over and over again.
So I don't expect him to bowl that much, if at all, to be honest. Maybe the odd over here or there. It's a bit of a MacGuffin because you talk about him, the first thing people ever say is ambidextrous bowler, but he's not really a bowler at all. The thing about Sri Lankan cricket is like all good Asians, everyone has to have two jobs, right? So almost in that 11, I think only almost all of them will be able to are multifunctional. I don't want to say all-rounders, but we'll do something else.
There's one advantage in that if he wants to see it this way, is like actually there's less pressure on his batting because people are not that as focused because all hype is on his bowling. He's not even going to bowl. Then actually it takes the pressure off his batting and he can go out and enjoy it.
When it's 47 for 6, the pressure's all on there, mate.
I mean, on the the names to watch out for. In the spin ranks, where what's the shape of the spin bowling?
Oh, I'm glad you've asked me about this because we've got Prabhat Jayasuriya, who is had quite an interesting trajectory. Obviously, Sri Lanka's famous for spin bowlers, right? So we've had Murali, then we had Herath, and I think Jayasuriya is the kind of next one off the production line. He was the quickest Sri Lankan player to get to 50 wickets. He did it in 7 games. He didn't make his debut till he was gone 30, which was 2 years ago now. Which is quite similar to Rangana Herath's trajectory as well. Herath made his
played a lot later.
Played a lot later in his career. I think he was when he only got into the side when he was about 32, right?
32, yeah.
He's a left-hand spinner, real handful for players particularly in Gaul, right? He's basically the butcher of Gaul. This guy.
What's his strength? Is he accuracy? Is it big spin?
It's the stock ball. It's that stock ball. It's going to come in. It's just consistency off it, accurate and consistent, and it's going to really irritate the batter because you can't get it away, and that's when you make your mistakes off it. I'm not sure how useful Sri Lanka's spin attack will be in Old Trafford though, or in. Or basically just in English conditions, because it just goes back to, I think, Prabhat Jayasuriya has been a professional cricketer since he would have been like 21, 22. He's just about to play his first meaningful game in England at the age of 32. So you just got to learn these conditions.
Thing is, though, they're coming not at a bad time. I mean, it's much better than the West Indies when they came here. It wasn't great weather. We've had a consistent period of dry weather now, hot. Old Trafford as well. Get a bit of bounce. It might get a bit dusty. It might get some turn on day 3, 4.
I'm trying. Look. My natural inclination to say is, look, sorry lads, but we're going to win this 3-0. But also, I think the point I want to get across is that these are actually good cricketers, right? Regardless of whatever happens, the problem is the system is working against them to be able to put out a good series. So what's going to happen is, or what could potentially happen is, say if they lose all 3 matches, or if it's like 2-0, they end up coming away with a draw in one of the games or whatever, there'll be an outcry for, there's no point getting Sri Lanka over. They're not a good test nation. They don't have the great players that they used to have. It's just so flawed to compare this side to the side and say that came over in the mid 2010s, which was stacked with great players, because those lads had the opportunity to come over every 3 or 4 years, and they knew the conditions. People knew them. You go back and you look at someone like Kumar Sangakkara. Kumar Sangakkara starts out his career, he's quite an ordinary average batter, but he's given the opportunities, which admittedly he takes.
God.
No. No. Hold on. But he develops himself into a great, right?
Yeah.
And he'll say that himself. He talks about that quite openly. And
he's a humble man. I mean, one of the greats.
He is.
Cover drive.
Yeah.
Oh.
But very few players are born that way, and the idea in this day and age, and we saw it with West Indies, and we could potentially see it with Sri Lanka again, is that you're going to go to these great cricketing nations where people are as passionate about cricket today as they ever have been, and bring over a side that don't have the opportunity to play, you don't have the opportunity to play much red ball cricket, and for them to be competitive, it's just not going to happen, right? Joe Root could well end up, higher up will end up higher up that Test all-time batting ranks by the end of this series, right? And, maybe people need to start, when you talk about his records, you need to start saying, but he played in a time when half the teams they're playing against were basically undercooked for Test cricket, right? He's going to be batting against attack that have basically never bowled in English conditions, apart from, I think, a couple of them who played like 5 county games between them.
I don't think it was all his career would have been like that.
No,
maybe just towards the back end. He also played some good sides. While we're on England, though, before we move on to a general chat about Sri Lankan cricket, a lot will depend on what side England put out. So no Stokes. What would you do in terms of replacing him? Would you try and get an all-rounder in? Would you play an extra bat and have one less bowler? I mean, it's a real conundrum.
Yeah, it's a big issue, and I think the captaincy as well, the mindset, the way they've played out. I always felt like without Ben Stokes, for them to be able to play cricket in the way they have over the last few years, it's going to be a challenge, and we're about to see that. So that'll be interesting. And then the big issue, or a bigger issue, is like, how do you balance the side out? The reality is, you're not going to be able to do it in the same way. You're not going to find someone who can bat and ball as well as that. So you've got to make a choice. I think they'll go bat. I think they'll just add
Jordan
on the bat.
Cox.
Yeah, I think so. They're excited about him. He looks like he's got a bit about him. And back their seamers to do the job. That's what I think they'll go the line of. But it's going to be a challenge. I think Sri Lanka can put England under pressure at different moments. If they see with Sri Lankan cricket over the years, where they are at their best is they think outside the box. They've had to be a bit more street smart, different sort of ways. And if they can bring that into this Test series, because naturally within the England team, without Ben being round, it'll be interesting to see whether he's actually at the ground. There'll be a little bit of, right, if they find themselves in a situation, who's going to replace that? It's fine, go out there and do it. So it'll be interesting. And if Sri Lankans can, try and take them individual battles with the batters and start to really do some quirky things and mess with their head, I think they'll be able to pose a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. I think you miss Stokes' aura as much as anything. And you look at that batting lineup now, and apart from Root, it's pretty inexperienced, isn't it? And, things do start to go south early. Who's going to be the one, as you say, to get them out of a mire? I think it might be closer than some people think. Going back to Sri Lankan cricket on the whole, that India series was very interesting because the T20s, I was there in Palakkele, India hammered Sri Lanka in the first 2, and you thought, oh God, they're going to win all 6 games here convincingly. It won't be much of a spectacle. The third T20 was really close. Sri Lanka should have won it. It went to a bizarre game.
I lost about 6 months of my life.
that was one of the most incredible games I've been working at live. Extraordinary. Went to a super over. Surya Kumar Yadav bowled the last over. Bizarre. Rinku Singh bowled the over before. And they managed to take it to a super over, and then India won it. So they won the T20s 3-0. And then you went to the ODIs thinking, okay, well, the longer the format, the bigger advantage for India. They're probably going to win these as well. And we've got a tie in the first game, which India should have won. They lost 2 wickets for none when the scores were tied. So they lost their 9th and 10th wickets when they should have got over the line. And that seemed to just revive Sri Lanka. And then they came out in the last 2 games and just outplayed India on a really turning pitch in Colombo. That's short. It's the first time in 27 years that Sri Lanka have beaten India in an ODI series. Surely that is something that they can build on.
Absolutely. I think with Sri Lanka, there's no doubt that the talent's there, the passion's there. Almost every team in the world aspires to have a Sri Lankan coach or someone in their backroom staff to kind of bring that innovation through, be it, we talked about him already. Sangha might end up replacing Matthew Mott, and obviously Mahela's in charge of the whole Mumbai Indians operation. that everything that made Sri Lanka cricket great and got us to this stage is still there. I think there is a bit of a narrative around Sri Lanka at the moment that we kind of slipped away a little bit, which is potentially true. But actually, as somebody who watches almost every ball they ever play, I just think that the kind of issue we've had is we've gone to major tournaments the last like 3 or 4 times, and we've just really let ourselves down at key moments. Go back to that World Cup. Why they decided to bat first against South Africa, it's one of those great what-if moments in Sri Lankan cricket history, right? If they bat second...
On the worst pitch of all time.
On the worst pitch of all time. Admittedly, the only thing I can say in Hasaranga's defence is, I mean, nobody would have ever thought the pitch in a major international tournament would have been that shonky, right? If that result was slightly different, if the Bangladesh result in the next game was slightly different, then Sri Lanka get through to the Super 8. I don't think they're going to win it, but I think it changes the narrative around the side. The players are still there. We talked about Pathum Nissanka. We've kind of mentioned Kusal Mendis a little bit. Avishka Fernando comes into the ODI side. He can, when he gets going, he can really bat. We've always got, there's no end of guys who can turn a ball in Sri Lanka. Jeffrey Wandasay, I thought his career was over. They picked him up. I don't know where they've gone and fishing him out from, but he's turned up and he's having the series of his life.
Got a 6 foot.
Yeah,
It's India.
And he's in the Test squad. He's come over, and Charath Asalanka. You talk about, as he was talking about batters and bowlers, and I said everyone in Sri Lanka can do multiple jobs. The guy's the new captain now, and he's there for batting. I don't think he'll ever bowl a ball outside of Asia, but against India, for whatever reason, he can absolutely find wickets. And top of all that, the player I think is the most exciting for Sri Lanka at the moment, emerging through, is Dinith Welalage, who's this like 21-year-old now, who just seems to have, I think he's got Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma out 5 times, and he's only played about 12 games.
Not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. I think he's just the man for the big occasion. I think we've kind of lost a bit of kind of sense of what, how to play the big moments when it's come to it the last few years. But I think there's signs it's kind of coming through. We've got a lot to thank the IPL for as well. I mean, so many of our young bowlers are coming through the IPL. I'd love to see more of our batters get a chance in there. I'd love to see what would happen if Kusal Mendis and Pathum Nissanka got a franchise took them up for a couple of seasons and kind of they experienced what it was like to play for the big franchise teams and the big franchises. I think then there's Sri Lankan cricket isn't in as bad a place as people like to make out it is. I also, will caveat that with, I'm not expecting us to win any major tournaments in the next couple of years, at least.
Asia Cup, you got a good record in the Asia
Cup.
Yeah,
we've got a great record in the Asia Cup, and the women are doing well in that as well, right? They won that unexpectedly.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. I think when you have the likes of Sangakkara, Jayawardene, and these people retiring, there's always, when you've been so reliant on that, there's always that little bit of a period where, you're finding yourself again, and finding players, and then you start to give opportunities. Some do as well as you wanted, some don't. And it just feels like they're going through that moment a little bit, and that's all right. The problem is, as you mentioned earlier, there's just not enough cricket for them to, grow fast enough or get enough experience to be able to start challenging the top 3. And that's, that's the conversation you could have across a few teams.
That's a, good point about cricket in general and whether there's enough of it. Leading up to international level, what is the talent pathway? Is it still very much based on the schools? The school system was always very important in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so the school system's massively important, right? Almost every school which has boys in at the moment has something called a big match, and they'll have a rival school, and they normally play them in like test venues. And the reason pretty much why I love Sri Lankan cricket because of my dad, right? My dad went to one of the big schools in Colombo, he went to St. Peter's. And to this day, and he's in his 60s now, not every year, but every couple of years, him and his mates will be like, right, big match on this time in March. And they'll fly out and they'll go there. There'll be like 20,000 people inside the stadium cheering them on. It filters quite like it used to be initially, kind of post-colonial. It used to be something that only the big Colombo schools did and a couple of big schools in Kandy. Now it's kind of filtered right down to almost every school will have a rivalry. It'll be quite big. In fact, Charith Asalanka, Kamindu Mendis. There's about four, and Hasaranga. About 4 or 5 of the boys all were in the same school team together and came through the under-19. So it's a really big driver for creating players. But what we're starting to see now, though, is in some of the more rural areas are tending to produce quite a lot of our bowlers, and they're not necessarily coming through a more orthodox kind of the pathway, as it were, the traditional Sri Lankan pathway that was set out. Seeing someone like Dilshan Madhushankar is coming from down south. He came from a very rural background, a really humble background, and was basically just spotted playing cricket. With the softball, Nuwan Thushara, who's done well for the Mumbai Indians this year, one of our slingers, he's come through a kind of similar route. There's a lot of our bowlers are coming through the softball cricket route, tape ball cricket, where they're playing with one of those kind of taped up tennis balls, and that's where they're developing these unorthodox actions and styles, and they ended up not really playing much leather ball cricket till they get to about into the early 20s, and the kind of the reason the coaching over there, they don't want to kind of temper too much with their styles. That's why they're coming through looking so kind of strange compared to everyone else. Though I think there is a small issue with our batting with shorter form of cricket, where we're not producing power hitters or as many power hitters as we need to. And I think a lot of that comes from, because our batters are still coming through a traditional pathway, they're being taught really orthodox.
I think the power hitter point's quite similar to Pakistan, very similar, and it's weird because actually, Sri Lanka, 96 World Cup, Jayasuriya, Kalawitharana actually started that, and even growing up watching Pakistani players, Razak, Azhar Mahmood, sixes was a thing, and it feels like sort of the top nations have, just taken it to a different level, and I think that's with the bringing in the baseball coaches, etc., the research and the techniques that need it to take it to the next level. And countries like Sri Lanka and Pakistan haven't really gone back onto the school. I watched one of them games.
Did you?
Incredible. Like if you was to look at bring it to England, if we, the talent pathway we have, and put the schools just like that under it, the talent that would come through, incredible. I mean, packed house watching schools game and everyone into it. No, it wasn't just a day out. Everyone was really into the match. It was incredible.
Oh yeah, it's like a 4-day festival,
Yeah.
right? It's crazy, and there's quite a lot of money. And kind of media and attention around these school matches as well, right? So that when a player does well, they'll end up on kind of, people talk about them on TV, on radio, they'll kind of go viral. So Dunith Walalage, who got a load of bag full of wickets against India, he kind of emerged as, I think he was the captain of St. Joseph's, which is one of the other big schools in Colombo. And people, he kind of got a following off the back of that. Balika Rajapaksa, who's one of our power hitters, who's in his 30s now. He was, I think, schoolboy cricket of the year in like 2010 or 2011, and people still talk about that. When they talk about selection for the national side, they'll hark back to, what he did as a schoolboy. You're like, that was almost 15 years ago. Like maybe kind of he should have, we all need to move on a bit from there. I mean, like my dad and his friends in their 60s, I was with them yesterday or 2 days ago. We were driving to a cricket game, and he was telling me about a schoolboy cricket match he remembers watching, and going through it. People, it is Sri Lanka's equivalent of the Premier League, in the same way that people over here talk about a great Steven Gerrard goal. They'll talk about, do you remember when Russell Arnold won us this match against St. Joseph's or whatever. It's absolutely crazy, the passion that people have for it. It's brilliant.
I'd have loved to have gone to one of those schools, to be honest with you, and played in front of loads of people. Would have been what a thrill. As opposed to UCS against Highgate, 5 men and a dog on a Saturday. In terms of the organisation and the relationship with the government, what's the situation with that at the moment? Because historically, didn't the sports minister have to sign off every squad or every team?
Yeah, so the sports minister's got to ratify the squad. The reason for that is because Sri Lanka's great sporting kind of plight up till the early 80s was trying to get Test status, right? They were absolutely desperate for it. They did everything they possibly could, and there was the Sri Lanka team, or the Ceylon team back then, did quite well in the kind of mid 60s and late 60s, and they got invited over for a tour of England, and the MCC had basically said, if you do all right, if you come over and you're kind of competitive, you don't have to win everything. you'll get Test status. And then what they did is the selectors who were recently retired players all picked themselves because there was a tour of England up for grabs, as it were. So they came over and they didn't put Sri Lanka's best foot forward, and it became a kind of national crisis. In Nick Brooks, who's one of the guys who does Muralian with us, he's written a great book called An Island's 11, which charts the whole history of Sri Lanka, and that's where I first read this story. So because it caused such a national furore, the government stepped in and said, right, from now going forward, the sportsman has got to sign off on the squad. From my understanding, is that generally the SLC submit their squad, and unless there's something really odd, unless they've brought back somebody who retired 10 years ago or something, the sportsmaster generally doesn't interfere. Though obviously there was an issue just after the last 50 over World Cup where Sri Lanka ended up being
briefly suspended.
Briefly suspended.
Was that because the sports minister did intervene?
Yeah, because the government and was it I can't remember who it was, and basically the government intervened with SLC and basically said, what is going on here? You need to put these guys in charge. We need to put our guys in charge, because cricket's such an important thing over there, that when they crash out for World Cup, it's seen as a humiliation if they don't lose in the final, if they don't win it. It's always, or if they haven't done something. No, if they crash out, if they come 10th in the World Cup like they did last time.
Is that not unrealistic expectation though? I mean, I know that the bar was raised in the glory days, and they lasted a long time. It wasn't just one generation; it was a couple of generations at least.
Yeah.
But now, do you not think the fans need to understand that it's going to be a long way back to that point at this stage? And if Sri Lanka don't go through to a Super 8, it's not a disgrace.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, I don't know. You look at that Sri Lanka squad and you think they should be in the top 8 of the world, right? I mean that their white ball bowling squad is kind of good enough to win IPLs, right?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. The bowling attack is good.
And then the batters kind of just have to go and do something, right? It's like, and they're professional cricketers. I do think, we're unlikely to get to 4 finals in 10 years anytime soon. And I do think sometimes there is an overreaction, but I also think it's important that people kind of maintain a standard, right? Particularly, Sri Lankan cricket's an institution, and Sri Lanka is a country, like a lot of countries around it, where institutions quite frequently, standards lower, they drop, they fall away, and before you know it, what used to be something great is not something great anymore. So yeah, I feel bad for the players, because I think there's no scope to make mistakes, and I think it's very difficult once you're in it to be able to grow or to to try new things, because there's a heck of a lot of pressure on you. But I also I do also think it's outrageous the government get involved in it, really. But I also understand why people feel so impassioned about it. Sometimes, obviously Murali and myself were quite active on social media talking about Sri Lankan cricket, and some of the interactions I see, not just from Sri Lanka fans, from fans across Asia, with regard to whether a team perform, I think it's totally out of order, right? It's crazy. And I'm in no way I'm going to justify it, but I can see how they've got to that point of total madness, because Sri Lanka is a country where, if you're going to be brutal about it, I mean, everything that could possibly happen to a country in the 30-year period's happened, right? We've had civil war, we've had economic crashes, we've had various political crises, we've had homegrown terrorists that may or may not have been sponsored by the state. No one's quite sure. We've had a moment where we had a tsunami. No one had even heard that word before it came and wiped out hundreds of thousands of people. So it's we talk about it being a great place to go on holiday. We talk about it, as great people, but it is at times been a really difficult place to live. And I think that's had a really deep impact on the psyche of a lot of people there. And I think they've ended up defining themselves on the back of the cricket team, because it was so successful for so long and has had so many great players from it. And not just, great players, but people who've gone on to really hold, the rest of the game is held in high esteem. And I think that's what you're seeing channeled into a lot of the kind of toxicity around the club, around the team.
Is there any other sports that are, as a young person growing up that, you have ambition to, or you've got role models, or is it pretty much like Pakistan with one nation, one sport nation?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked me this question, because rugby, which is obviously the sport I grew up playing, or still play, is absolutely massive in Sri Lanka as well.
It's amazing, that, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah,
I've never.
Why is that?
Because all the big schools were were basically set up as British kind of private schools, right?
Schools.
So it was rugby, then cricket. Also, that's what you ended up playing. Sri Lanka is a country where there is a lot of culture and tradition of playing sport, right? So volleyball's actually a national sport of Sri Lanka, bizarrely. I don't know how that happened. There's also, in the rural parts, that I can never remember what the name of it, but there's a kind of version of baseball that they play as well, which can be quite popular. That I think is more like kind of softball or rounders or something like that. There's a lot of netball played there as well. We've had some star netball players as well. They're and they play a lot of basketball as well. But there's absolutely no hope in any of these other sports.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
There's
There's nothing to, like the Olympics has been going on, there, or even rugby.
Yeah.
That's not, you're not growing up like I'm going to do that, and have a good professional career and earn money and, go on and achieve a lot. It seems like, just like Pakistan, so it's very much a one sport nation.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see what happens in Pakistan now that they've won a javelin gold medal, right? What
a moment! Did you watch that?
Oh, it's unbelievable.
I saw highlights of it. Yeah, incredible.
Unbelievable. Still goosebumps.
So there was a lady called Susanthika who got a bronze medal in the 200 meters was it 2000 or 2004?
Yeah, I remember that.
And then that, because of a drug issue with the person who finished, I think, gold, she ended up becoming a silver medal. But they weren't really able to kind of harness that into anything. Admittedly, at the time, Sri Lanka was in the midst of a civil war, and well, it's always, politically, there's always a lot of turmoil. What's been the other really interesting thing for me that's happened in Sri Lanka around sport in the last few years is that I think Infantino, the president of FIFA, has spent more time in Colombo than he has in London since he's been president. He's put a
What's he doing?
Enjoying
What's he up
food,
to?
isn't he?
So on the planet, I think there's 198 recognised countries. I think Sri Lanka are ranked like 208th in football. And when you go, there's places that aren't even countries that are better than Sri Lanka at football. I don't even know how that works. But if you go and look at the rankings, you go right to the bottom of them, you're like, right, so all the other teams around us are really tiny nations. They're like Pacific Islands. So, and on top of all that, Sri Lanka is a place that is kind of sports mad, right? They love it. Everyone's talking to you about cricket, rugby, football. They've all got a Premier League team they support. Too many Man United supporters there, but we won't get into that. And I don't know who made the decision, but at some point in the last few years, someone at FIFA said, we need to go target them. We need to try and put something in. So they've got Andy Morrison, who's the former Man City striker. He's the manager of the side. They've got quite an extensive program where they've been bringing players in with Sri Lankan origin from across Europe and some from Australia to play for the national team. There's a few national team players, a few kind of born and bred locals in the national side as well. It's quite a good mix. They've had our big rivals in football appear to be Bhutan. I'm not sure how that's happened. They're putting a lot of kind of resource into it. I think it'd be difficult to kind of not kind of cricket off its perch, but thing is about
it doesn't need to not cricket off its perch, but it's having other, and that's where I think a lot of the toxicity comes from. It's so similar, everything that you're talking about, to Pakistan, and it's just like,
nothing else to focus on,
and that's the only thing, and that's where I'm hoping Ashar Nadeem winning a gold medal is going to, because ultimately it's decisions at the top, right? It's the resource, it's what you put into the schools, a pathway, you show people ambition, that what's achievable, and then people go down that line, right? And having role models is very important, I guess.
I think Sri Lanka could be a force in rugby. I genuinely think that because they're so passionate about it. There's so many players on it. They've got an established professional league with old clubs. I think the reason why Sri Lanka became competitive and good at cricket is because it was surrounded by nations who were really good, who were world class, and they got regular access to play in them. They played Pakistan or India almost every year before they got Test status, and because of that, the players kind of stayed near or knew what the expectation levels were to play at the top level. The problem they've got with rugby is they're just not getting that, so they don't know how good they need to be to start to compete, and there's no one else around them that have to go to South Korea or Hong Kong or Japan to they get to a team that's kind of near enough a national level. But if they got to a situation where they could get some of the kind of, if you get the Georgia, Japans and Portugals and maybe kind of every 5 years Scotland went over, they could slowly start to build a program that in kind of 20 years time could get them competitive enough. And it's like, it's an interesting way to kind of finish this discussion about Sri Lankan sport, because the flip side of that is with Test cricket, with red ball cricket, they're losing that exposure. So that's why we're ending up in a situation where players have got double centuries against Ireland, but are going to come over here and struggle with the moving ball.
You're going to go to the Test matches?
I'm going to all three of them.
Are you?
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And are you going to be podcasting? What's the Muralian doing for it?
We're going to be podcasting. For the Lord's Test, we've teamed up with a pub called the Three Falcons, which if you're into Indian food, you'll almost definitely know because they make some great butter chicken and great biryani. It's about 3 minutes walk away from the stadium. We're doing meetups there for all the fans. You don't have to be a Sri Lanka fan. You don't even have to have a ticket to get in the game. You can come in. We've got some special guests lined up. It's not just me and Nick whittering away. It's other people who've been involved with Sri Lankan cricket for a long time coming down, come and chat to us, come and meet us, and we'll be recording over there. And yeah, we've got loads going on. It's a big kind of carnival of Sri Lankan celebration, I hope.
Looking forward to it. I might even pop down, I think.
It'd be great
maybe
to have
on
you
one
there.
of the days.
Yeah.
Watch this space. Mark, that was really, really informative, mate. Really
Thanks
interesting.
for having me. It's a
Loved
pleasure.
having you on.
Brilliant.
Do you know, I'd love to get him on every week and just talk about Sri Lanka. We can talk for days about Sri Lanka. We didn't even
get onto
to the food.
seafood.
Yeah, I know. We didn't get onto food, did we?
The prawns, mate. The
Hoppers.
lobsters, the hoppers, the crabs.
The crab in Sri Lanka. Right.
That's my next summer. I'm going to go spend 5 weeks in Sri Lanka.
Do it. It's so cheap. It's a great place to go with the family. You get all sorts of geographies, as he said. You can go up in the mountains. You've got the jungle, wildlife. You've got beautiful beaches. It's got everything.
I don't know if you've done it, Matt, but I think the best thing to do is going safari.
Yeah, I've done an elephant safari once. That was really amazing. But I've not seen leopards or anything like that. Anyway, that's for another trip, isn't it?
Yeah.
Azim, cheers, mate.
Thank
Good
you.
to be back in the
Great to be
studio
back
with
here.
you. And thank you very much, whether you've been listening or watching. Remember, we do have a YouTube channel as well if you want to watch videos. So we'll put the whole episode up there as well. Do download, please, if you are listening as a podcast. That really helps us grow our network. And make sure you follow us as well across our social media platforms at INJC Pod. Thanks very much. We will see you next week.